Chapter 51 The Promised Land. The 2 Israelite scouts sent to the city of Jericho were eating at Rahab's inn when officers from the king of Jericho knocked loudly on the door. "2 officers have come from the king of Jericho to arrest you," Rahab whispered to the men. "They're impatient and I must go to the door at once. I know who you are and I have my reasons to help you. Hurry up this back stairway and hide yourselves under the flax you find drying on my roof." Joshua chapter 2 verses 1 through 4. The Israelite spies didn't waste any time asking questions or waiting for more explanation. They dashed for the stairway in the back, and Rahab turned to go to the officers. Rahab outwits the soldiers. "If you're stalling us, woman, we'll have to arrest you too," one of the officers impatiently snapped. "I hurried back there to the dining booth to find out if any of my lodgers noticed which way the 2 men went," Rahab explained. "They were here, but they left just before the gates of the city were closed for the night. If they are Israelites, they're probably on their way back to their camp, and our soldiers could overtake them before they reach the river." Rahab lied about these things, but God makes use of all kinds of people to bring about his purposes. In this matter, he was using a Canaanite woman who had never been taught God's commandments. The king's officers did not spend any more time talking with Rahab. They strode out of the inn and barked orders to nearby soldiers. Within a few minutes, the gates of the city swung open again, and a search party of soldiers scurried off into the darkness in the direction of the Jordan River. As soon as the soldiers had left, Rahab went to the flat roof of the top of her inn to talk to the Israelites. She expected to find them well hidden under the flax on the roof. Instead, she found that they were not quite fully covered. "You're safe for now," Rahab whispered. "They won't be back for a while. We Canaanites are well aware of your intention of taking over our country. We know that your powerful God gave you this land. Our whole city is frightened because you have so swiftly overcome nations to the east and southeast. We have been dreading the day when your soldiers come over the Jordan. Our terror is so great that no one has any courage left." "If you believe that Israel is going to take over your land, why are you trying to protect us?" one of the Israelite spies asked Rahab. Rahab trusts in God. "Because I believe your God is the true God. Long ago we heard of great miracles he performed, especially in causing the Red Sea to part so that your people could pass through. I want to be spared by your soldiers," Rahab continued. "I have shown you my kindness. Now promise me that your people will spare my life and those of my relatives, the households of my father and my brothers and sisters, when this city falls to you." "We promise to do as you ask," the Israelite spy told her again, "if you will agree not to mention to anyone what has taken place here tonight." Rahab solemnly assured that she would keep the matter to herself. The Israelites then instructed her that she should tie a red cord, which one of the spies gave her, in the window of her inn, and that all of her relatives should take refuge there when the soldiers of Israel would reach the walls of Jericho. "But if any of your family is outside of your doors when we attack, we cannot be responsible for them. On the other hand, if any of your family within your inn is harmed, we will be held responsible before God for that harm." "So be it," the other Israelite spy muttered. "But these promises can't mean much if we don't get out of here tonight. We don't dare wait until daylight, and the gates will be barred all night." To answer this, they went downstairs to an open window facing outward from the wall. Rahab gave the men a bag of food and a long rope, and the scouts knew what to do. They tied one end of the rope to a ceiling beam and let the rest of it drop out the window. "Don't try to return to your camp now," Rahab warned. "The area between here and the river will be swarming with our soldiers for many hours. Hurry to the hills west of here and hide in the caves for 3 days. By that time it should be much safer for you to go back to your people." One at a time, the Israelites slid down the long rope, which was more than enough to reach the bottom of the wall. Rahab pulled the rope back up and waved to the men as they melted into the darkness. It was not easy to travel over foreign terrain at night, but the darkness wasn't so intense enough to prevent the scouts from keeping on the move. The two fleeing men shortly reached the limestone hills, where they found a number of caves. They chose one cave next to a small water spring, and for the next 3 days it was their hideout. The scouts report to Joshua. At the end of the 3 days, the two men set out again eastward during the night to reach the Jordan River. There they waited for daylight, and again they managed to swim across the Jordan River. From there it was only a short distance to the Israelite camp and safety. Joshua was pleased at the report of the scouts, especially because it showed the shattered morale of the Canaanites. As for Rahab and her family, Joshua agreed to the promise that this one Canaanite family would be spared. Joshua knew that God's death sentence upon the Canaanites did not apply to those who willingly forsook their heathen gods and put their faith in the true God. After all, the reason God had condemned the Canaanites was because they were the worst kind of idolaters. Deuteronomy chapter 9 verse 4 and Deuteronomy chapter 12 verses 29 through 32. Those few people who repented, as Rahab did, were to be shown mercy. Genesis chapter 12 verse 3. As soon as Joshua had finished hearing the report, he told his officers to take word to the people that they should prepare to break camp the very next day. Great activity followed. Flocks and herds grazing outside of the camp had to be rounded up. Families packed all their possessions except what was needed for meals and the night's rest. Early the next morning, the Israelites finished breaking their camp. The tabernacle tent, the fence, and all that went with the tabernacle were packed for moving, and the Israelites set out on a march toward the Jordan River. The trip took almost all day, and took them away from the acacia groves near Mount Nebo, but into more groves of palm trees. They stopped just before arriving at the river and set up their camp again on the east slopes leading down to the Jordan. Although the Jordan wasn't a large river such as the Nile, those Israelites who were curious enough to go down to the banks were greatly impressed because it was the largest river this new generation had ever seen. At that time of year, due to spring rains and the melting of snow in the high mountains to the north, the Jordan was swift and swollen, overflowing with murky water. Those who saw the river returned to tell their neighbors what it was like. Only the very strong swimmers could hope to make it across the Jordan, and building rafts or a bridge would require so much time that all the armies of Canaan could concentrate at the spot and easily ruin such a project. However, this was to be no problem for Israel, because God had already given private instructions to Joshua so that the people would realize God was with Joshua as he had been with Moses. A miracle needed! Next morning, Joshua told the priests that they should personally take the Ark of the Covenant and bear it to the river ahead of the Israelites. Joshua chapter 3 verse 1 through 7. Ordinarily, the ark was to be carried in the center of the mass of people, and was carried by Levites who were the sons of Kohath. Numbers chapter 2 verses 1 through 31, and Numbers chapter 4 verse 15. As God commanded, Joshua then told the priests that they should wade into the edge of the overflow water only a foot or so with the ark on their shoulders, and then stand still while God intervened in the flow of the river. Meanwhile, the evening before, Joshua had asked the people to gather together to listen to what he had to say. All of you should make yourselves and your garments clean for what will happen tomorrow. Before us there is a swift and swollen river that we need to cross. I have already heard that some of you may not think that it's possible to cross it. Have some of you lost faith in your God, who brought you out of many situations far worse than this one? Now be assured that God will again prove to us his power by taking us safely over the river. The Ark of the Covenant will be carried to the river before you by almost a mile. When those who carry the ark walk into the Jordan, the stream itself shall cease to flow past the ark. That part of the water to the south shall drain away, leaving a waterless riverbed over which we shall cross to the west bank. This should show you that God possesses all the strength and means to get us safely over the river, to drive out our enemies before us and deliver Canaan into our hands. God made sure that no one entered the promised land with any doubts or misgivings. Joshua then instructed that the 12 tribal leaders each should select a strong man from his tribe and send him to Joshua for a special task. Every man selected, when he passed over the riverbed, was to pick up a good-sized stone from the rocky river bottom and carry it to the west bank for building a monument. Joshua chapter 3 verses 8 through 13. The Jordan flows backwards? Early that next morning, the priests started out with the Ark of the Covenant. None of the Israelites followed until the priests were almost a mile away, which put them at the edge of the river. They might have hesitated for a minute or so on the east bank, but then they stepped boldly into the swift, muddy water. Every man realized that unless God acted within seconds, the men and the ark would be swept away downstream. Before they could wade up to their knees, the water flowed away to their left, and at the same time, the water to their right abruptly ceased flowing. In fact, its direction of movement was actually reversed. It started to go upstream. As the priests continued to march into the midst of the Jordan, it gradually grew higher and spread out further out on its flooded banks to the north side. Thus, with the water receding in both directions, a growing expanse of empty riverbed was exposed to the view of the marveling priests, and those of the waiting Israelites who could see the miracle from a ways off. The bearers of the Ark of the Covenant went to stand in the middle of the riverbed, and then obediently stood still where they were. They felt deep gratitude for being allowed to have a part in such a great miracle. When Joshua had made certain that all was ready, he signaled the Israelites to move onto the river. It required a long time for almost 2 million people and their tremendous flocks to pass any given point. The specific number of hours depended on how wide their ranks were. In this event, even though the riverbed was emptied for such a distance and gave the people plenty of room to spread out and pass through, probably the people were pouring over the Jordan for several hours. Whatever the time needed, the priests, who were rugged outdoorsmen, patiently remained standing where they had walked into the water. They didn't move out of the riverbed until the last of the Israelites had passed over, including the lead group of 40,000 soldiers sent by the 2.5 tribes already settled on the east side of the Jordan to help conquer Canaan. One would probably wonder how men could remain standing for so long, especially while holding a heavy golden ark. Perhaps God gave them special strength to stand for such a long period while bearing such a weight. Except for the priests, the last to pass over the riverbed were Joshua, his aides, and the 12 men who had been picked to obtain the special stones from the middle of the riverbed for a monument to God on the west side of the river. Before they picked the stones for that purpose, Joshua had them build a 12-stone memorial in the middle of the Jordan River where the priests were standing. The priests had to move a little bit in order to make this possible. After the monument in the river was finished, it was still visible in the river many years later when the Bible account was written. Each of the 12 strong men took up another stone as large as he could carry and walked out to the west bank. A promise miraculously fulfilled. Behind these 12 men came the priests, and as soon as they had carried the ark well up on the west bank, a peculiar murmuring sound came from the north side of the river. Within seconds, the murmur grew into an alarming roar. The waters that had been held back for so long had abruptly been freed, and they came crashing and boiling down the river channel with a thunderous swishing noise. Joshua chapter 4 verses 1 through 18. This mighty miracle of God, plainly foretold by Joshua, had a deep effect on the Israelites. They realized now that Joshua, like Moses, had been chosen by the Creator as their outstanding leader. Their respect for him was very great from that day on. The Israelites also realized that God had now completely fulfilled his promise to take all of this new generation over the Jordan and into the promised land. Again, the congregation fell into their march, this time with the Ark of the Covenant carried by the Levites in the center of the column. The people traveled straight west a few miles and then stopped to make camp. It was there that the 12 stones carried from the Jordan were stacked up into a monument. Joshua then came before the crowd to speak to as many as could hear him. "This heap of stones is to be a reminder of God's great miracle in bringing us across the Jordan River," he announced to the people. "Tell your children in time to come what it means, and remind them that God also brought Israel across a much greater body of water, the Red Sea. This monument is also to remind all people who see it or learn of it that our God is to be greatly feared and respected." Regardless of Joshua's reference to God's strength, there were some people who stared fearfully towards the west as the night came upon them. They felt uneasy because the west edge of Israel's camp was only a little over a mile away from the forbidding walls of the strongly fortified city of Jericho.